It's 11:59 at the Gold Podcast, and this is the Pen Patriot with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Hello and welcome to the Goal Podcast, news and commentary from Gun Owners Action League, your leading voice for the Massachusetts gun owner. I'm Garrett, across the table from Jeff. As you heard online, we got John Petrolino, the Pen Patriot. Welcome.
Hello, how are you guys? How's everyone doing on and behind and in front of enemy lines?
We're hanging in there, man. How's everything going a little bit further down the East Coast of New Jersey? You guys are always chasing our tails for the worst gun state in the country.
Dude, we are so busy, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of angst, and honestly, like for the updates on like everything New Jersey, there are some stories that I've been working on that I've been following. But what we do have that's going on like right now, so by the time the show airs, the arguments would have happened already, but we have a case. It's the Benton case, and it's a coalition in New Jersey, firearm owners and gun owners of America case. And GOA, they do great work, and they partner with CNJFO on this lawsuit, and that's going to be something that's challenging our pistol purchaser permit law. So we have arguments coming up on that soon. I'm going to miss them. I was supposed to be able to go, but didn't happen. So like by the time this comes out, those arguments would have already have happened. That's one piece of litigation that we have going on here in Jersey that I think is positive. And then also we're sitting here waiting on our carry killer, response, our Bruin response decision. So I don't know, you and I, the three of us, we didn't talk too much about this, I don't think, the last time we were all together, but our Bruin response law was pretty intense, and I want to say it was signed in December of 2022. So these guys were like wicked quick to get up on it, get it introduced, and get it enacted into law. And, luckily we've had like two different waves of attacks towards that in the way of litigation. So our state association, which is ANJRPC, they launched a case. It's the Siegel case. And then our, couple of the other organizations in New Jersey, CNJFO, in conjunction with Second Amendment Foundation, I believe FPC is in on it as well, and that's the Coons case. There was a bunch of different parties involved in that, and I got to say, the governor of New Jersey signed this, into law, and within minutes, both of these lawsuits were filed, and I want to say, like within a week, we had emergency restraining orders. So we had these emergency stops of the law, like almost immediately. It was like a blitzkrieg within a week. Wow. Yeah. So then pushing it into 2023, we had those, emergency restraining orders, two of them, which they ended up combining the two cases into one case. And then we got this tremendous, like 200-page preliminary injunction at the beginning part of 2023, and that was the federal district court, and that like enjoined the state from enforcing the majority of the Bruin response law that they just signed. So it was like massive kudos to our state association and Second Amendment Foundation and all the other groups that were working on this. But because there's always a but, right, guys? Yeah. In the middle of 2023, the state moved to, have this appealed up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and they did a temporary stay on some of the stuff that was enjoined. So, everything that was in the, in the preliminary injunction is now, some of it is active, some of it isn't. So it's not like we've got the awesomeness of like the 200-page opinion that we had. I mean, that's still very good law, but they just put a temporary stay on some of it. But the case was heard in, I believe it was September or October. Now I can't even remember, of 2023 in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. So we've been sitting here for well over a year now waiting on a preliminary injunction from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. And, you know, the feeling is we're going to hear something sometime soon. And the idea is that there was a lot of stuff going on in the courts that could have mired this, whether it was the Third Circuit or the Supreme Court. And so getting an opinion right away probably wouldn't have been the best thing for us. So sitting there in the state that we were, but yeah, we've got these active pieces of litigation that are going on in New Jersey, and they're just really kicking in a tremendous way. And I just massive thanks to any of the supporters of the groups that are out there. You know, I know the national groups, obviously, a lot of people support. So like Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America for like the Benton case, FPC, yeah. But then obviously anybody that supports our state association, massive thank you, because these guys are really doing God's work right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's on one hand, it's great to see people come out swinging on stuff like this, but on the other hand, it's like we really shouldn't have to, you know? Like,
well, yeah, exactly. We shouldn't have to is right. You know, but you know, thankfully we do have the people doing the work and putting the time in, and I mean, you see it the same. You know, like you guys are in the thick of it. So, Massachusetts, I know, has had battle after battle as well.
Yeah, we are behind different lines, but we're behind enemy lines for sure.
So that's kind of our litigation update in New Jersey. And then legislatively, they just launched like a ton of anti-gun bills, and the most scary of them is I forget the term that they used, but basically an irresponsible like firearm discharge thing, where basically they're going to make it where you could get charged for this discharge of a firearm, provision in the law for almost anything. And you guys know what that's going to turn into.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a mechanism to prohibit people from owning guns and making gun ownership hard. That's what it's all about.
So you guys have a bunch of stuff going on. Let's what's on your mind?
Oh my God.
We do. So, post Bruin for us, they codified this whole suitability standard into law, in an IT bill of all things. There was a IT infrastructure bill, and they just decided to shoehorn a ton of language about how suitability is now, like a pseudo legal standard that chiefs just are able to do. And then, of course, we went through the Chapter 135 stuff, which is where we're at now. And we saw the same thing, immediately lawsuit. And the state said, well, we're going to take that section and we're going to delay it 18 months. So therefore your lawsuit has no standing anymore. Thanks for wasting your time and money.
Yeah, that's like the modus operandi with this stuff. It's like playing whack-a-mole, right? We finally get a suit together and we get it written and filed and everything. And then they change some stupid little thing, either from guidance or something like, not even legislatively. They just change it by issuing a guidance memo, and then it moots the case, and they do this strategically, I think, just to run out the clock and, run out the treasury too.
Yeah. We had the Civil Rights Coalition got together and did a petition to repeal the law.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
tremendous.
To put it to a vote of the people. Like, hey, there's a process here. And they got almost double the amount of signatures they needed. But in the process, I think Maura Healey and her gargoyles in the State House got wind that this was going to go through. And months after the bill passed, she decided that all of a sudden she needed to pass an emergency preamble. The law needed to go in effect right now. And therefore to kind of half nullify the petition.
Yeah.
So instead of... So it will still go to a vote of the people in 2026, but what she managed to accomplish was that if we had enough signatures, which we did, it would have frozen the law in place and said that it wouldn't be enforceable until the people voted on it. So she managed to put the law in place via this emergency that wasn't really an emergency until it was an emergency. And then,
I got to tell you the level of just the word that I want to use is criminal activity, right?
That's what it feels like to me.
And I say that, I mean, kind of tongue in cheek, but at the same time, aren't there laws that, like, what about isn't there supposed to be an audit going on in Massachusetts? Isn't that one of the things that's supposed to be happening?
You know, all the people that scream about defending democracy, like about 80% of the state voted for the legislature to go through an independent audit. And they have been fighting it tooth and nail, saying that it's somehow a violation of separation of powers.
Yeah, right.
But, obviously we need to defend democracy by making sure that nobody can see what they're doing with your money behind closed doors.
Yeah. So when I say almost criminal behavior is, okay, maybe your governor had the quote unquote, the powers to do what she did with this emergency preamble. I mean, she did it.
Yeah.
But like, come on, we're going to change the rules halfway through.
Well, exactly.
I mean, Toby and his guys connected with the ball. They were already following through.
Yep.
And this is what they did. And then let's not even talk about the shenanigans on who was registered to vote where.
Oh, yeah.
And who was able to be an original, signatory of this. Like, what they did was tremendous.
Yeah,
I mean, Toby's doing some serious work there with this.
Yeah.
And thank God that they are. But look, this shows the hypocrisy. And what blows my mind is, like I reported on this, like the emergency preamble, the gun people. This should be national news about this goose-stepping governor that stopped this from going through. Like, this is the process. We're playing by the rules, and then you want to change it?
Absolutely.
Yep, they can just rip the rug right out from under you. And, and like you said, is it illegal in the sense of like it violates some sort of, statute? No. But is it morally and ethically indefensible?
Yeah, there's no question that she had the authority to do that, but it was certainly a bad faith move. I mean, if it wasn't an emergency in July when the law passed, then it's still not an emergency in October when she signed the emergency preamble. So she did it clearly in response to the voice of the people saying, no, we don't want to do this. And it was to my mind, a horribly cynical move. Criminal, maybe not, but certainly bad faith and cynical.
And then there was also the shenanigans at the Big E, stuff that went on over there.
Right. I still love that picture of a guy holding a sign over her head. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and they ran him off though, it's crazy.
They don't want
to. And then I don't know, you guys read all the police reports on that, right? Because I published all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you guys got that, but I got the police report about the anonymous caller and the police department. They were great. Over there when I called them for the Open Public Records Act request or the FOIA, like those guys bent over backwards, tripping over themselves to help me get all the information. And I got the police reports, the whole 9 yards. And they're like, yeah, there's nothing going on here. Like what, this is insanity.
Well, unfortunately is when you talk to a lot of individual officers, individual law enforcement agencies, they tend to come down on our side and they say, listen, this whole thing is crap. We all know it's crap. We don't support it.
We don't want to enforce it.
We don't want to enforce it. We don't want to deal with it. Even the agencies for the state that are now tasked with enforcing these laws are actively trying to find ways to get around them. Right. That's how bad it is. But when it comes time for them to stand up and say so in front of the legislature before this stuff goes through, then all of a sudden everybody's got to play the political game, and the chiefs have to get together and come out and go, well, we support the things that give us the tools, which really just turns into, as long as they get their carve outs and they're not affected by the law, then cool with it's fine. As long as they don't have to be restricted like the regular folks.
Nobody wants to lay out any skin on it. Nobody's going to stand up and mutiny. Nobody's going to stand up and say, no, we're not doing this. They make all the right noises, but at the end of the day, the law is still in effect, and it's still something that people get thrown in the clink over.
Right. And I had this question that came in the other day, and people talk about we had the Bruin decision. Isn't all this stuff settled law? Like, why are we Why are we following any of these laws? And this was over my friends in California's gun owners radio. And it was an email that they actually got. And the guy said, I'll volunteer to be the guy that's the test case. And I said to the host over there, I said, because he asked me, well, what do you think about this perspective? I said, well, it sounds like the shall not be infringed, group, the guys that are beating their chests. Like, yeah, it's fine. Like, I get it. I am with you. And you know what? If you want to do this, dude, I will cover your story. I will follow it all the way through the charging, the conviction, your sentence. And by the time you get out of jail and you get your appeals all done, you'll have served your time. And, there we are, and there's no, so, I'm with everyone on this when it comes down to these are infringements, but these are the rules that we have to deal with right now.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a quote unquote sovereign citizen, God bless you, but there's going to be consequences to that. And the consequences aren't such that say, well, this is my constitutional right. And then the judge is going to turn around and say, I didn't think about that. You're free to go. It's not how it works.
Never thought about it that way before.
And it's sad because they know good and well that everything that they're proposing isn't going to solve any of the problems that they're claiming it will in order for them to get their legislation through. So even in Rhode Island's now going through a potential, it's being pitched for an assault weapons ban.
Yep.
With their offer. So right now there's a case that's pending writ of certiorari and for Supreme Court, Ocean State Tactical.
Like 10 times
Rhode Island.
around now, yeah.
So Rhode Island used to not have magazine capacity restrictions. It used to just be, have the standard magazine that came with a firearm, no problem. They banned those and said that all magazines now have to be, 10 rounds or less, all the same restrictions that the other anti-gun states had, except they didn't add in a grandfather clause at all. It was either destroy your magazines or turn them into the state. That was it. Those were your only two options.
Which seems like a clear taking to me, but yeah, we've been down this road.
Now with the assault weapons issue, they're not, they are sort of adding in a grandfather clause by saying that you will have to register them and get a certificate of possession from the state to say that you possessed that particular firearm at that particular time for that particular date. And it doesn't seem to be very clear on, are those transferable from one purchaser to another, or
sell them? Yeah.
What's going on? But they all know it has nothing to do with the lawful gun owner. And I mean, you wrote an article back in January with your Senator Cory Booker saying, listen, we looked, we couldn't find any crimes that were committed by lawful gun owners.
Yeah.
So they know.
They don't care.
Yep.
That's not the point.
Right. Wait. Exactly. And, Cory Booker,
crazy
Spartacus, that's our Spartacus.
Piece of work, that guy. Yeah.
I reached out to his office on, and this is one of the stories that I've been following out here. And I know you guys have been tracking this too. And people that have been following me are probably tired of hearing about this, but it's important. And it's the racial bias issue that we uncovered last year.
Yeah.
Where my reporting, So my reporting found that there was like 2 to 2.5 times the number of black people being denied permit to carries over white. And this is for non-criminal stuff. This is basically the, suitability requirement. It's our public health, safety, welfare standards. So these are guys and gals that already have their firearms identification cards. They've already gotten pistol purchaser permits. They've already passed through NICS to buy handguns. Now they're applying for permits to carry, and they're being denied on the suitability, basically, interest of public health, safety, welfare standards. So I crunched the rough numbers. The rough numbers is it's like more than double. Well, and you guys, I don't know if I talked to you guys about this yet. Maybe we did. But a bias watchdog group in New Jersey picked up on my reporting. They launched their own independent study, and this is academics. Like, these guys published the data in Harvard. Okay, let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
This is a peer-reviewed study. These are all academics. They're not really gun people. I think one of the guys might be a gun guy. Whatever. Whatever. But what they're looking at is the bias, right?
Yeah.
When they normalized the data and they adjusted it for population, Do you guys know the answer to this? How many times more likely is a black person likely to be denied than a white person for a permit to carry? Take a stab at it.
I'm going to say it's more than the 2 times that you found.
I don't know, 5 times, 4 times,
5 times.
Yeah,
Jeff, do you want to take a stab?
Are we doing closest without going over?
Yeah, right. You give one guess. We got 5. You'll take 6. It's 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So a black person is 10 times more likely to be denied a permit to carry in New Jersey, and then they broke it down by county. So like my county where I live, the instance is 0. Like the rate, they're like how much racial bias instance, they have no record. I don't think they denied a single black person a permit to carry at all in my county.
Right
so
on.
They don't have data, right?
Yeah.
In the county, one county over from me, Ocean County, take a stab. What do you think the worst county in New Jersey? What's the rate?
Oh, the worst one?
The
So
worst?
if the state overall is 10, I'll go, or 10 times more likely, I'll go 20.
G-Man, what do you got?
25.
50.
Jesus.
Good Lord.
50 times
Holy
more
cow.
likely.
You know, in
Right.
any other domain, if it wasn't guns, if it was anything else, jobs, schools, anything else,
ACLU,
this would be national news.
national
They'd be
headlines.
pounding down the doors over it.
Ask me what the ACLU said about this.
What did the ACLU say about this?
Nothing.
Yeah.
They ignored it.
Of course
They ignored it.
Please log on and chat with our
NAACP.
virtual assistant, and we'll get back to you. in 10 to 12.
And
Gus.
NAACP, silent. Black Lives Matter, silent. Dr. Cornel West, who was running for president, by the way, silent. Al Sharpton and his group, silent. Nobody is like listening from any of the groups. Now, I mean, here we are. I broke the story in May of last year. The study that came out, it's so everybody knows, it's called Rise Against Hate is the name of the group, riseagainst.hate.org. You could go and check out the study in full. It's pretty impressive. And this is all New Jersey stuff. I know, boring, but guys, like, we're kindred spirits, right?
Oh, yeah.
So Rise Against Hate study came out maybe, we'll say 4 weeks ago, maybe. And now there's some traction with some other outlets that are covering this outside of our world.
Yeah.
And it's been slow going. It's been very slow going. So that's like one of the drums that I've been banging over. And I know you guys have seen a ton of a ton of coverage on this, but it's important, you know?
Sure it is. In New Jersey versus Massachusetts, all that stuff, you know, it is important because time and time again, what we see in one place, we tend to see in other places. And we are, at the end of the day, we're fighting the same battle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys may have had the shot heard around the world, which is coming up, right? Your anniversary. I'm sure you guys are going to plug that. You know, but we also had where, Washington crossed the Delaware, you know? I mean, that was pretty cool.
That was somewhere down
on Christmas,
woods, right?
you know? Yeah, it was my neck of the woods, exactly. The Battle of Monmouth happened to happen in Monmouth County, so.
What a coincidence.
Coincidence, yeah. If anybody's listening, I really live in Winchester, Tunfieldville, New Jersey, but it's in Monmouth County.
Well, if they're looking to do some follow up on that bias, I would love to see Massachusetts numbers. So you just so when you research that data and you're submitting FOIA requests, how are you phrasing it to the state? Like, how are you saying, like, this is the data I'm looking for?
So this was pretty cool. And this was like the preamble to all of those stories was in March of last year, this permit to carry data dashboard came out where the Attorney General just put all of the data out there.
Oh, yeah.
So it was
like that. Sure.
It was gathered. It was anonymized, right? So we can't look to see who it is, but it was how many people, applied for permits in every single jurisdiction, the denials, what they were denied for, the whole 9 yards. The only thing that had to be connected was the race data. So all of the information was ordered to be collected the year prior. So that information was collected. So the request that these guys did was very simple. They just requested the raw numbers connected to the denials. When I did it, it was funny because I go on the dashboard because, again, I'm just crunching numbers. These guys are doing like solid academic research, not like journalism from my wife's basement, like me, you know.
Like how you phrase it, from my wife's basement.
Yeah, journalism from my wife's basement. But so when I did it, I'm looking for the race information on the dashboard, and it's not there. And people that were way smarter than me, they also couldn't find the race information. And we were digging, so I put an Open Public Records Act request in, which is the FOIA in New Jersey, and I asked for them to give me the race data, and they gave me instructions on how to access it. And I don't know, man. Like, wow. I'm not going to say that the data was there. Maybe it was, but they waited, though, to give me those instructions. It's not like they gave those instructions right away. And it's like, oh, I get it. There's like, other requests out there. Well, we also found out that the Attorney General's Records Office gets less than one request a day on average for records. So if they're throwing out the majority of them anyhow, like, what are you really doing,
Yeah, that's a pretty heavy workload, one a day.
Well,
so for Massachusetts, we would have to go, and this is a project I'm happy to work on. Like, if you want to help me out, if people want to get in on this and you want to amass some researchers and people that want to do this, we'd have to figure out where to get the information, because it's a matter of what records are kept right now. I don't know Massachusetts's open public records laws or their FOIA laws are going to be different than New Jersey's. Like New Jersey, they changed to New Jersey's. It's kind of cute where they changed it that, if they want to put a restraining order against somebody that's asking for records requests because they're asking for like too many records requests, they can do that. That's the new law.
You want to know too much. You
Wow.
Yeah, so they did that. And they also did it to where they could hold you like financially liable and sue you over this stuff. Like, it's totally insane.
Yeah.
So AmmoLand News used to do a ton of Open Public Record Act requests, and that's where I really cut some of my teeth reporting from 2020 on, was going through these records. And dude, the things that I remember, the first records dump that I read through, I just called my wife and I said, I'm like so angry reading these records because like the government really is fighting against you, and they really are. Like, when it comes to the Moms Demand Action and the Everytown people, like, they legitimately listen to them. Like, hands down.
Well, those people are lobbying to concentrate power with the government.
Those are the people. Yeah, they're right. They fight on behalf of, basically the collectivist mindset, and they're the people that have the seat at the table.
Oh, yeah. The chair is against the wall, my friends. Absolutely.
I'm going to have to watch that again. It's been so many years.
Well, Massachusetts, they have this is my understanding of it, very terrible open records request policies and rules.
Yeah.
To the extent, I think a lot of the conversations and meetings and things that happen in the State House are not requestable.
A lot of the stuff that the legislature does, they have the right to keep, for some bizarre reason, they can keep that stuff quiet. But as we all know, it goes even deeper than that, because if suitability is, won or lost at the local level, then it only gets recorded anywhere if somebody takes the proaction to do that, takes the action to actually do that. I'm going to guess, and I don't have any data to back this up, but I'm going to guess that the majority of the time people walk into their police station and say, I want to apply for a license. They're told no, and then they just give up. That doesn't get reported.
I think the way we would have to go about it in Massachusetts, and I don't know, it might be at every jurisdiction. I don't know, guys. I don't know how your firearms records work and how the denials work and how all of that fleshes out. So, if anybody wants to do this project, you can email me, john@thepenpatriot.com. Like, I'm happy to, and this goes, I might as well do that public service announcement right now. If you've got news tips or anything, like, I want to hear from you guys. I'm a lifetime member of the Gun Owners Action League. I went to school in Massachusetts. I picked up my roommate in Massachusetts. I spend a lot of time up there in the Bay State. and you guys got some awesome advocate activists, working for you there. And so Massachusetts, it's like a surrogate state of mine. Like you guys, like I kind of adopted you too, especially because your laws are just as bad as New Jersey's, and in some regards worse.
Yeah.
And you guys have a history that's like really, really bad. So like you talk about some of the mentalities, and like I'm a libertarian guy, and you guys pretty much are too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mean, when it comes to identity politics, whatever, we're not going to talk identity politics. But Massachusetts has this weird habit, and it goes back hundreds of years of like, if they disagree with you, they're going to call you a witch and hang you from a rope. That is the mentality of Massachusetts. And guess what, guys? It hasn't changed. It's just a different rope, okay?
Right.
So when you have personalities and you have the talking heads and the politicians and the people that are going to sit there and say, oh, we're singing Kumbaya and everybody's welcome. Yeah, until they want you on the end of the rope. You're a witch. And that's what the gun owner is in Massachusetts. And what do you have? 6%, 6 to 10% of the population, right, is licensed to carry holders in the Bay State.
Like I think
the statistics. So 10% of you, they want hanging from ropes, guys.
Yeah.
And honestly, and of those 10%, they only want to hang the people from ropes that aren't into hunting. If you're into just hunting, like you're cool. Like if that's all you're doing is like,
they don't like us either.
They don't like hunters either.
Well, I got my duck gun. I'm good to go here. I don't have to worry about.
Unfortunately, that's
rifles.
Unfortunately, that's other hunters. But I mean, this baloney, this Constitution challenge proof malarkey that they let go on us last year was
they went after
everybody. There is not a segment of gun ownership that this law does not.
But it mobilized them, right? The hunters are mobilized.
Yes, yeah, it did. It lit a lot of fires that weren't there before.
Did they have their torches? Are they on their way?
I certainly hope so. We got 100,000 people to organize and say hell no, and then the governor went and did her thing. So
no, dude. Oh my God, we can't. We keep rehashing that, man. It makes me so angry. But
it makes me
just
sick.
So when you think about these things, and you write to your lawmaker and your public servant that works for you, and you reach out to them like Michael Day, for example, just remember, you're a witch and they want you at the end of a rope.
Well, we have the 250th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord coming up in a few short weeks.
Yeah.
I know. I'm very, very bummed that I cannot make it.
What the hell, man?
Yeah, seriously. So we're calling you out on the carpet right here.
You're calling me out on the carpet. We don't want to play this game, guys. You ask around in that office there about getting called on the carpet. I'm still waiting on my invitation to come.
You consider yourself invited. When are you going to be here?
No, I can't make it, guys. I wish I could, and I would love to be able to support you guys. And you guys have some tremendous people coming. You have
we do.
Adam Kraut from the Second Amendment Foundation.
Yep.
You have Doug Hamlin from the NRA. He's the executive vice president and the CEO of the NRA. He's supposed to be coming. The great Cam Edwards, Bearing Arms, editor-in-chief, and Cam and Company podcast host. Wonderful person, good friend. Who else do you guys have? Lieutenant Colonel Alan West.
Alan West.
Am I killing your thunder? Am I taking away from your
we've been trumpeting this we've been trumpeting this for months now. Dick Heller's going to
guys, I'm just doing this from memory, right? So Toby Leary, right? He's going to be there. Who else do we have that are Charlie Cook's coming? I know Charlie's supposed to be there, riding shotgun with Charlie. Wonderful guy. Who else do you guys have?
Dick Heller.
Yeah, Dick Heller's going to be there. A lot of big names are coming. A lot of people coming out to support the cause.
It's really awesome. We had Dick Heller at a couple of fundraisers here in New Jersey. And you guys know Anthony Calandro. He's an NRA board member, owns Gun for Hire.
I know him by name. I haven't.
Yeah, so he runs Gun for Hire, does Gun for Hire radio podcast.
Yeah.
He goes and he has Charlie Cook give an announcement. He goes, hey, say we've got all these copies of the Pocket Constitution, $20 each. if you buy a pocket Constitution, Dick Heller will sign it for $20. Dude, we sold a ton of pocket Constitutions.
Oh, yeah.
It was incredible. And Dick was happier than heck to just sit there, sign the Constitutions. And what was bizarre, what was funny is I had a couple of guys come up to me. And, I was there at the dinner. And they're like, hey, can you sign the First Amendment? Dick signed the Second Amendment. And I'm like, what? I'm like, why do you want me to do this? I'm like, Dick Heller signs your Constitution. You do not want me writing in this.
Right.
Like, no. I want you to sign the First Amendment.
I'm gonna
and I'm like, you're out of your mind. But okay. I mean, like, I'm giving you an opportunity to back out. I'm trying to tell you this is a bad idea, because do you know who else signed my Dick? Because I got one from Dick years ago. You know who else signed my Dick Heller Constitution? Nobody. That's it. It's just Dick Heller. I'm like, I don't want anybody else's, like, signature in there, So
it's not a yearbook.
Yeah.
No, exactly. But dude, they raised a ton of money for Women for Gun Rights and CNJFO, and Dick was happy as heck to do that. They just sat there with a case of Constitutions, and you could buy them from like these different organizations, wicked cheap,
Yeah. Yeah.
Right on.
So I'm definitely bummed that I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm trying to swing the annual meeting. So I'm going to tease that right now.
There you go.
I'm going to try to make it to the annual meeting. I have a wedding the night before in Staten Island, New York. So there's some logistic issues.
Yeah. There's some real logistic issues.
It's possible you can make it work.
So I just need to get a couple of things lined up with my roommates, and once I get that taken care of, I should be good to go.
As long as you don't have too much fun at the wedding.
Well, you know what? Like, I really
to the meeting.
I usually, and I'm not a big drinker, guys. Like, it's not my thing. I got to tell you, when I was in Vegas for SHOT Show, which you guys got to come out to SHOT Show, definitely, as representatives of goal, like, you guys totally
would make me happier if I could swing that.
Well, let's make this happen. So, SHOT Show, I had probably my quota of alcohol for like the entire year, but we're talking about, I had a couple of drinks with Tony Simon, 2 drinks with him. And then when my roommates came out to visit me, because they came at the end of SHOT Show on the last day, it was great. I just got done wrapping up meetings on that Friday, and I came in Friday morning. It was still morning. I'm pulling up in my Uber, and they pop out my roommates from the taxi cab, and they got their little suitcases, and we're in the Excalibur because I'm cheap. And I'm watching them go through the lobby, and I'm walking next to them, and they're like rolling their suitcases, and my kid's like, oh, I wonder where Dad has that, and I'm like right next to them. They had no clue. So, I spent another 5. So I was in Vegas for like 10 days straight, guys. It was insane. And I think with my other roommate, my eldest roommate, she and I had like a couple of drinks, like on our Vegas vacation. I want to say like an old fashioned, a box of wine, like as in one like sippy box at like the medieval times kind of place. I'm like, yeah, so I'll have a glass of wine. And like it came in a box. I was like, that's cool. Where's the straw? But I'm not a big drinker, so going to the Staten Island, wedding shouldn't be one of those things that's going to really destroy it. It's just a matter of transportation and figuring that out. So we'll see, guys. I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to say no. But once I figure it out, I'll let you guys know. And
all right.
I know it's not going to be like hanging out with Cam and Doug and Adam and all those guys. I mean, I could be your consolation prize, for the annual meeting.
It's like, oh yeah, that guy from Jersey came down, and yeah.
Well, John, I really do appreciate you coming on, and I know we were like bouncing dates back and forth and times. And,
yeah, there was a little bit.
It's great to have you. And I wish we could have gotten you for the upcoming 250th anniversary, but hey, if you make the annual members meeting, I'll be more than happy to see you.
There you go. I'll buy you my mom.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you guys so much. And, Jeff, like I said, I know Garrett and I are over here just like a couple of guys stuffing the refrigerator with Tannerite saying, check this out. And totally unamused by us, but it's always a pleasure to hang out with you guys. I love you all at Goal. I love Dr. Green, Jim, all of you, Mike. Everyone's fabulous. And, thank you for having me as part of the family and having me on the show.
Right on. We appreciate you very much, John Petrolino, the Pen Patriot. Thanks for coming on, man. So there's John Petrolino. It's good having him on. He's
always
a riot. Yeah, he's funny.
It's my favorite favorite emails to send.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Hopefully, we'll see him for the annual meeting, if not the the upcoming event anyway. So what do we got going on other than Mr. Petrolino?
Well, there is some news that just came out recently. We're going to put that to the end, but we have the conclusion.
The wrap-up.
The wrap-up of the history.
Well, this is our last episode before April the 19th. So the story so far, the British march on Lexington, it went about as badly as it could go. Poor planning executed to perfection, lost the element of surprise for the British, and they arrived at Lexington very late to the party. Adams and Hancock had successfully evaded capture, and the munitions avoided seizure. But when a forward advancing group of British Lightfoot, led by Lieutenant Jesse Adair, encountered approximately 77 militiamen, led by Captain John Parker, confrontation was inevitable. As tensions reached a climax, a shot of unknown origin rang out, and the British, in a stunning display of undisciplined fury, launched an attack on the militia. When the smoke cleared, 18 Americans lay dead or wounded, and the British, after firing a victory volley and rallying up, learned that their day wasn't over. They were now ordered to march further onto Concord to conduct yet another raid. As fast as the word got out that they were on the march from Boston, word of their massacre on Lexington Green was sure to spread even faster. They would not be making it back to the safety of Boston before everyone within distance to do something about it learned that American blood was on the ground.
After evading capture by British patrols, Dr. Samuel Prescott made it to Concord, warning them of the impending British march. The town's Minutemen assembled and sent scouts towards Lexington, while the rest of the militia, led by Colonel James Barrett, gathered to plan. Word from the scouts quickly came back. Not only were the British coming, but they had opened fire on the militia in Lexington. Barrett asked the scouts, was it blank or ball, meaning were the regulars firing blanks as an intimidation tactic, or were they firing live rounds, actually shooting at people who were standing in their way?
Yeah.
The scouts reported that they believed the British were firing ball. They were firing live rounds. So disagreement had broke out amongst the Concord militia. The younger, kind of more hot-blooded of the men wanted to march out immediately to confront the British. The older militiamen wanted to remain in town, perhaps moving back as far as across the Old North Bridge. They wanted to set up a more defensively sound stronghold, understanding that the British, they didn't want to play to the British strengths, they wanted to play to their own. In the end, the strategy split, and about 200 militiamen moved out towards Lexington while the others remained in town. The men on their way to Lexington did not make it far before Colonel Barrett and the leader of his Minutemen, Major John Buttrick, had the British column in view. They saw steel bayonets, bright in the morning sunlight, stretching back for a quarter of a mile. They quickly rethought their plan for direct confrontation and turned back around to Concord, gathering the remaining militia and heading about a mile away to Punkatasset Hill across Old North Bridge, but still in view of the town. When he reached Concord, the commander of the British, that was Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, divided his forces. He sent 3 companies after the militia, 4 companies to Colonel Barrett's farm, where spies had said arms and munition were stored, with the remainder to stay and search the town. Major Pitcairn, who was in charge of the troops at Lexington, turned his attention to the local tavern where spies had formed on the owner for hiding arms. The British broke down the tavern door, held the owner at gunpoint while they confiscated 3 large siege guns before ordering the owner to prepare him and his men some well-earned breakfast. Imagine that. Yeah. Kick in your door and then say, by the way,
cook for us.
Get the fire going. Grenadiers started ransacking homes, destroying anything they deemed military stores, military-grade equipment.
Yeah, which could be anything they chose to see.
Sound familiar?
Yeah,
modern terms?
Yeah. Weapons of war, you mean?
As they stacked up wooden gun carriages to be burned, the town's Liberty Pole, where the militia would muster, was cut down and added to the pile before it being lit into a spectacular bonfire. The fire grew so intense it spread to the nearby town meeting house, where townspeople and even some of the British regulars had to jump into action to save the building. At Barrett's farm, the British, unable to find the arms that had been freshly buried and plowed over in Barrett's field, thanked Mrs. Barrett for her cooperation by ransacking her house and forcing her to provide them breakfast, tossing her a few shillings as they left her house.
Jesus.
As the British continued their pillage of Concord, more militia started arriving outside the town, including the Acton Minutemen, who were probably one of the few groups that were actually equipped and experienced comparable to that of the British. As the militia's numbers grew to some 500 men, the leaders decided it was time to start pushing towards the town. They marched right towards Major Buttrick's home, where the first company of regulars they would encounter stood post. The British company withdrew as they were outnumbered and too far away from their comrades to get support. As Colonel Barrett moved his militia into formation, they noticed and started to see the thick plumes of smoke rising from the center of town. Isaac Davis, leader of the Acton Minutemen, drew his sword and said, "I haven't a man who isn't afraid to go." The militia leaders ordered their men to load, and Isaac Davis's Acton Minutemen led the march down to Old North Bridge to face the best standing army in the world. Their musician, Luther Blanchard, carrying nothing but his fife, started up the song "The White Cockade," which I dug into that.
Yeah.
And it turns out that song was meant as an insult to the British and to the crown. Now, the cockade was a ribbon. It was like a political ribbon, sort of the 1700s version of like buttons and bumper stickers.
Yeah, they wear their hats, and
the colors would indicate your political allegiance. White happened to be the color that was worn by Scottish and Irish rebels who had fought against the crown in the centuries prior.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
So that was a little
tip of the middle finger.
Thumb of the nose at the British.
Yeah.
But as the militia moved in, the British retreated to the south side of the bridge and took position to concentrate fire on the bridge if anybody crossed. As the militia closed the gap to a mere 50 yards, the British, for the second time of the day, opened fire without orders. First a few shots, then a ragged volley. Isaac Davis was immediately hit in the chest and fell dead. Next to him, another private was killed, and Luther Blanchard, the fife player, along with 3 more, fell wounded. Buttrick shouted for his Concord Minutemen to fire. "Fire, for God's sakes, fire! Fire as fast as you can."
So the militia returned fire from all along the riverbank, tearing into the British flanks. Officers in their bright red uniforms made convenient, identifiable targets for the superior marksmanship of the Americans, and nearly half fell in the first volley. The militia fired fast and accurately, moving down through the rank and file of the British soldiers who now, without effective command structure, broke and ran for safety, leaving their dead and wounded, about 16 casualties, behind. The victory was almost as surprising to the Americans as it was to the British. They didn't have much of a plan beyond first contact, and it took a few minutes to regroup and come up with a new plan. Colonel Smith, hearing the gunfire, knew something was wrong. He rode over to find Buttrick's 200 or so Minutemen dug in behind a rock wall, covering the south side of the bridge, and Barrett, with the rest of the militia, mustered up watching over the north side of the bridge. The companies of men he sent to Barrett's farm had no choice but to return through a gauntlet of crossfire, and there was nothing he, or the handful of regulars he had with him, could do about it. As the 4 companies returned, they marched quietly through the carnage under the watchful eyes of Barrett and Buttrick's men. As they showed no further aggression, the militiamen let them pass. The British now had opened fire on Americans not once, but twice. The first at Lexington went uncontested, ending with a huzzah and British victory volley. The second at Concord saw Americans fight back to defend themselves and their countrymen. The regulars had nothing to celebrate now, as they were facing a very sobering reality. A single cartridge box of ammunition might not be enough to get them all the way back to Boston with wounded in transport. That 18 miles started to feel longer and longer as the minutes ticked by.
By noon, Lieutenant Colonel Smith of the British had commandeered enough wagons and carriages to get his wounded officers back to Boston. The injured rank and file were left behind to make it back on their own if they managed to survive, but left behind.
Every man for himself, yeah.
About a mile down the road, they came to a choke point where several roads came together at the corner of a farm owned by Nathan Merriam. There, Smith found almost 2 regiments worth of militia, some in military formation, others in positions as snipers. They held their fire as Smith's men filed by with their wounded, despite knowing what these very redcoats had done at both Lexington and Concord. But as the rear guard of the British passed, for the third time of the day, British regulars lost discipline and without orders leveled their muskets at one of the militia companies on their tail, as if they were preparing to fire. The surrounding militia, after seeing the British fire first on their fellow countrymen multiple times, took no chances. They poured in musket fire on the British, several redcoat officers and men falling to their deaths at what is now known as Merriam's Corner. From here on out, it was a running gunfight back to Boston, 17 miles to go. Many militia fought one by one from surrounding cover, trying to trap the British on the open road so companies ahead, militia companies, could set up ambushes. As the British column neared Lexington, they ran right into a very pissed-off Captain John Parker and the militiamen of Lexington, some still bloodied and bandaged from earlier in the morning. They waited until the officers came into their sights, and the bullet destined for Colonel Smith, the leader, ultimately responsible for the British troops' actions, left the barrel of its musket. Smith fell wounded, and Pitcairn's horse is shot, throwing the major to the ground. British light infantry do their best to drive off Parker and his men, but the redcoats are near wit's end. As the British regulars keep getting ambushed, their column begins to spread out. Morale begins to break as the wounded who fell behind were being captured. Many, if not most, are out of water. Ammunition is running low and being scavenged from the fallen, and officers started drawing their swords to either fight to the death or, in their opinion, worse, surrendering. The British regulars started to break ranks and run when from the front of the column they heard cheering. As if by divine intervention, General Hugh Percy and a relief force of 1,000 redcoats had formed up on the far side of Lexington. The courier, Colonel Smith, sent to General Gage before he ever even left Cambridge for Lexington, had been the best decision he made all day. Gage had a plan for reinforcements in his back pocket, and upon hearing the news, put the plan into action. Unfortunately, just like the initial raid, it was terribly behind schedule, almost 5 hours. But arrive they did with a couple field cannon and as much powder and shot as they could fit on the carriages. When Percy saw his fellow British fleeing with the militia in hot pursuit, he ordered the cannon fired and put a round right through the Lexington meeting house. The incoming cannon fire caused the militia to scatter and allowed the fleeing British to join ranks with Percy.
The lull was welcomed by the British, but it wouldn't last. Militia were pouring in from all directions, and 1,000 men were going to be outnumbered sooner or later. Although time would not be on their side, Percy was measured and deliberate in his movements. They left Lexington for Boston around 3 p.m. and 3 columns of troops, the largest on the road, and flanking forces on both sides. They left Lexington for Boston around 3 p.m. with 3 columns of troops, the largest on the road, and flanking forces on both sides, allowing the wounded to keep up and others to clear buildings along the way. They would not go without resistance for long. General William Heath, a militia leader and soon-to-be brigadier general of the soon-to-be-formed Continental Army, had some interesting plans for Percy. A tactical nerd, Heath knew that his militiamen were not best suited by squaring off with British in open field. He preferred his own technique for fighting a moving column of soldiers, one that he called the, quote, ring of fire. Groups of skirmishers would surround the British column on both sides, firing from a distance as redcoats went by, picking off troops and forcing them to keep moving. Newly arriving militiamen would be grouped ahead of the column in preparation for another ambush to maintain pressure and whittle down the opponent. From the British perspective, they were crawling from one ambush to the next, just hoping not to be the next person picked off. The combat grew thick at times, particularly in Menotomy, which is now Arlington, where the British had to start fighting house to house in order to make any progress. The British redcoats were not just fleeing for their lives. They were fighting a moving war against what was now, in their eyes, an unorthodox enemy, and they showed no mercy. In some homes, grenadiers would enter and kill every man they could find inside. They even took to looting some locations on the way, including liquor from the taverns and communion silver from a church. The fighting did not let up, and in the end, nearly half of all casualties that day would happen on the road from Menotomy to Cambridge.
After Menotomy, Percy and his column had to turn south to Cambridge, heading toward the Great Bridge. That would allow them to cross back over the Charles River. This is now the Anderson Memorial Bridge that links Cambridge and Alston. So if you want to go visit it, that's where it is.
Yep.
Much to Percy's dismay, militia occupied the far bank and had torn up the planks to the bridge. With ammunition running low, Percy doubted the column's survival if they got pinned against the river. He quickly redirected his men to the east, out onto the Charlestown Peninsula. The sudden turn forced a break in Heath's ring of fire attacks, but there's one more force standing between Percy and safety. Timothy Pickering and a regiment of militia from northern Massachusetts occupied a hill right in Percy's way. As fate would have it, Pickering was one of the few left who still believed this issue between the colonists and Britain could be settled without war. He ordered his men to let the bloody, beaten, and largely broken British troops pass by, where they finally came under the protective cover of the HMS Somerset's guns. As darkness and rain began to fall, the militia began to fall back as the Redcoats ferried their wounded across to Boston. Within 24 hours, Boston would fall siege to 15,000 militiamen. And with that, the Revolutionary War had begun.
We do have some news items to talk about. These are mostly court cases. Nothing here in Massachusetts, all on the federal level. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court does not seem to have done us very many favors in recent days. Particularly, Antoniuk v. James was denied cert by the Supreme Court. On April the 7th, the Supreme Court denied, or declined, as they like to say, declined to hear the case, which was the challenge, if you remember, it was a challenge to New York's sensitive places ban and the good moral character baloney that they came up with right after Bruin. These were provisions in their Bruin tantrum law.
Yeah, it was their repackaging and rephrasing of the thing that they were told they couldn't do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So their so-called Concealed Carry Improvement Act that Hochul signed right after, like within 2 months of Bruin. This case has been up and down the appeals process under different names. This most recent iteration was most recently heard back in October. This particular docket that was in the hands of the Supreme Court this time was a request for a preliminary injunction, okay? And as we know, the Supreme Court does not like to involve itself very much in preliminary injunctions.
Yeah, those interlocutory cases.
Yes, exactly. So what this was trying to do was to get an injunction against the enforcement of those provisions of the law. But the lower courts have not yet fully exhausted all of the appeals process up through the Second Circuit.
Yeah, which unfortunately is kind of what the Supreme Court does. I shouldn't say unfortunately. It is part of their process.
That's what they do. They do not, before we sit here and say the sky is falling, I don't like this decision. I would very much have liked to see them, grant cert, because as far as the Second Circuit goes, this case or one very similar to this, or a previous iteration rather of this case, what made it to the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court said, no, you're going to GVR this, send it back down to the Second Circuit. And then the Second Circuit said, oh, no, we're not actually going to reconsider this. We're just going to say what we said before and send it back up. So it was like, a little bit of back and forth and people flipping birds at everybody else. So to me, it's unfortunate that the Supreme Court denied cert, because I'd love to see it taken and slapped down, but it doesn't surprise me that they did so. Not because it's necessarily an anti-2A court, but because they always shoot down interlocutory appeals.
The shame of it is that it shouldn't even be an issue, because the impetus behind the Bruin case was that you had to provide to the state's satisfaction a justifiable reason to defend yourself.
Yes.
Which means they had to believe you were of good enough moral character.
Yeah, which boils down to asking
this was already baked into the cake.
Yes, it boils down to begging permission from the government to exercise an enumerated right.
So,
and the Supreme Court in Bruin pretty clearly shot that down. So
simply changing the name to say, well, instead of asking you for a justifiable reason, we're just going to determine whether or not you're of good moral character.
Right.
It provides them the permission to do the exact same thing that they were doing before under a different name.
Yes.
A rose by any other name, right?
Yeah, and so I guess the reason that it disappoints me is not because it was denied on procedure, because we know the Supreme Court does this stuff as procedure. They don't get involved in cases that are not completely tried all the way up the chain. What disappoints me is that instead of denying cert for that reason, they could have said, no, we already ruled on this. This is, bullshit. That's what I would rather have had them say.
It does seem that every time the Supreme Court makes a pro-Second Amendment decision, they spend the better part of the next 5 or 6 years adding caveats and loopholes and backdoors
to
make sure that, we're we're pro-rights, but we're not. They're still
yeah, right. Government
not
has a lot of
absolute
power. Yeah,
we don't want to take away the government's authority over the people.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, Bruin. As soon as Bruin came down, we're like, yes, this is great. And it was great, and it is great. And then the very next 2A case, they started to backtrack.
But moving to local, so our local Attorney General Andrea Campbell has distributed $1 million in grants to 10 organizations to support gun violence prevention.
First off, why does she have the authority to do that?
I don't know. Where is
this, the Attorney General getting money for? Anyway,
despite Gun Owners Action League being the largest and most effective gun violence prevention organization in the state, not included in the grant list.
That's weird. I don't think the goal's getting a check from the. So
it seems that the only people who are granted money were the people who then donate and lobby for gun control.
Yeah. The orange shirts are on that list. They got money.
Real diversity, equity, and inclusion of differing opinions, right?
Yep. So basically, the money went to a couple of universities, to a bunch of community organizations, and of course the orange shirts, the local version of the anti-gun group, got their cut. Gold didn't get anything, which is hardly surprising.
Yeah. How's that state audit going, by the way?
Right. The one that 80% of the people voted for. The Department of Justice, on the good news side, the DOJ and the ATF have repealed their Biden-era FFL zero tolerance policy. As you remember, a couple years ago, Biden came down with this. If they fail to make the crossbar on the T, sufficiently wide so that it looks more like an L, then it's obviously fraud and they should be thrown in prison for 10 years. They have backtracked on that, apparently in response to President Trump's executive order on reviewing this stuff.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it
may be small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but it's got to be a little bit of a relief if you're an FFL because, it means that actual clerical errors are clerical errors and they don't get treated like you're a terrorist.
I don't know what you would do to make all the people who were harmed by the previous administration whole again.
Yeah.
I don't know how that process would look. When you don't have a regulatory system, so in the work that I do, there's regulatory systems and documentation on, like, here's how you format dates, here's how you format timestamps, here's how this gets put together. To hand someone a form that they are then going to hand to a member of the public to be filled out in indelible pen ink, and they have to get it perfect. You're going to end up with clerical errors. Someone writing, where it says county, someone writes USA because they
happens all the time. Yes.
It amazes me how many times I've purchased a firearm and they have stacks of blank 4473s because they just go start over.
Don't even try to correct it. Don't just start over again.
No single line strike through with initials and transcription errors or anything like that.
No.
For those.
Why? Because the federal government just loves to harp on stupid crap like that and make a big deal out of what is basically nothing.
So the reality is they went after a bunch of small businesses and mom and pop shops and people and jammed them all up because they didn't write the number down in the correct format that the ATF wanted on the form.
Yeah.
And because of zero tolerance policies, which are always the dumbest policies imaginable, there's no choice. I'm sorry, you have a violation, and therefore your entire business is going to go under.
Yeah. I'd love to help you, sir, but my hands are tied, right? So anyway, that's a little bit of a ray of sunshine. We'll see if anything comes of it. But that's really kind of it. To lead us out tonight, we're going back to Mr. Petrolino. Have a good weekend. We'll see you at the Goal event, which is just about a week away. There's still a few tickets left, goal.org. So go and get your tickets. We'll see you there.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening in. Be sure to subscribe to the Gold Podcast. To check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Gold Podcast MA. On YouTube at Gold Podcast. On Twitter at Goal Update. To join Goal, visit goal.org and click the Join Renew button at the top of the homepage. If you have a topic you think we should cover, if there's something going on in your club or town, or if you have a question for the mailbag, shoot us an email at goalpodcast@goal.org. The Goal Podcast is a production of the Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Goal, its staff, or affiliates.
Word for word, write down the numbers.
Could not have said it better ourselves.